Random Thoughts. In this video, I'm going to read a part of Sir Richard Burton's book, First Steps in East Africa, an Exploration of Harar, where he basically gives us the reason why we should be reading these old documents. Once I read this part, if you've been thinking that maybe we should not be reading these documents at all, I am thinking you are going to be persuaded that it is very important for us to be reading these old documents. I've heard so many people, and not just this document, but other documents that I've read and, of course, shared through video. People telling me, no, we should not read those documents. They were written by the British, by the Europeans. They are not reliable. They were very racist. All that is true. Of course, these were very racist people. They came from an era when the Europeans, of course, felt or thought of themselves to be higher than the rest of the people. And then they had this way of looking at these other people, especially the Africans. That was not a good way. That was filled with biases and looking down upon them, basically. And so, and also they used to write things that were basically justifying their activities, especially in Africa. Remember, the Europeans came to Africa because they needed to exploit the resources. But even during that time, they did recognize that it wasn't really right to do that because there were people on the ground and they wanted land, but they will find people on the land and then they will have to think, how do we justify our actions? So yeah, there is a lot of that in these old documents. So we need to read these documents, and going by what I'm going to read from these documents, as I've said, you are going to be persuaded that it's very important for us to read these documents so that we understand what happened. And by understanding what happened, we will understand what is happening and we will understand what might happen. And I know some people think colonial times are long gone. Not really, not really. There are things that are happening right now that are basically the same thing, because there is always need to exploit land, to exploit other people. There's always that need. And as long as that need exists, there are people who are going to try to do it. As long as there are resources in Africa and land, and there are people from elsewhere who will still be looking into ways to exploit those resources. So if we don't understand how things are done, or if we don't understand how what we can call colonization happens, it is going to keep on happening. It might come in a different form and you don't recognize it as colonization, but it still happens. So there is this part where I can say that Richard Burton basically gives us the blueprint, or gives us the method of basically tricking and manipulating Africans. And not only Africans, because he uses the word Orientals, people of the East, and that includes people in Africa and Asia and what you can today say is the third world country, basically outside Europe and maybe the US, then the North America. So the method he's providing here is the method he was using while in Somalia. And it's a method that, of course, seems like he used elsewhere. And he was sharing this in this book, and I guess he was sharing it as a way to inform others, Europeans, who, if they are going to go to lands like the land of the Somali and maybe the Arabs or maybe the rest of Africans, they need to understand this method because it works. And he's going to explain to us how you manipulate the people to accept you and to do what you want. And this is what he says. He says, you see, dear L, and I've said in another video, I don't know who L is. I don't know whether it's the wife or his superior. I don't know, but he keeps saying dear L as if this book was, of course, addressed to that person. So, but it's not important for us to know who this person is. What is important is what he says. He says, you see, dear L, how traveling maketh man banal. It is the natural consequence of being forced to find in every corner where fate drops you for a month a friend of the soul. And I found that line to be very deep. Wherever you go and you are dropped somewhere, you have to find a friend of the soul, which to me means you have to know how to make yourself liked. He continues, and moon-faced beauty. With Orientals, and I said when he says Orientals, he means people in Africa and Asia, East and South. He says, with Orientals generally, you must be on extreme terms, as in Hilbania, either an angel of light or, that failing, a goblin damned. That's also a very deep statement, actually. He means that with the people in the Africa and Asia, maybe, you have to stay on one of two sides. There is no in between, because if you are in between, it's not going to work. So you are either going to work to be so liked, or you have to be at the extreme end where you are so disliked because you are using force, basically. That's what I'm interpreting. And this is a line, and I think I've done a video before where I said, as humans, when we are dealing with humans, we either work for them to like us, or if that fails, you make sure that they hate you. Because if they like you, there is emotion there, and that's good. If they dislike you, hate you, there is emotion there, and it's better than being at the middle where people are indifferent to you. When people are indifferent to you, they easily forget you. They will not remember you, actually. They see people see you, the emotion is flat towards you. They quickly forget you. They don't remember you after 2-3 days. But if they really liked you and there was an emotion there, they remember you for years. And if you can't get that like, you are better off getting the hate or the dislike, because that will also stay with them for years, for decades even. So it seems to be using the same principle, that is either you are liked, very liked, or you are really disliked, but don't allow yourself to be, or the people to be indifferent to you. He continues, in East Africa especially, English blame, which I guess is like gentlemanship, or I interpret it to be something like that, shyness or pride, will bar every heart and raise every hand against you. So if you are going to be maybe too cold or something like that, then you are going to have people, make people not to like you or do things the way you want. He continues, whereas what Mr. Ratched calls a certain rondeur of manner. I don't know what that is, because this sounds like lingo that was internal lingo during that time. And this book was published in 1850, so there is a lot of lingo that we are not going to get. Even if we try so much, we are not going to get what it is, because it was internal lingo and it was language of the time. But we can guess a few of these things. He says is specific for winning affection. So it seems like Mr. Rochet did also suggest a method of winning affection from Eastern Africans. He continues, you should walk up to your man, this is your target, claps his fist, pat his back, speak some unintelligible words to him. If, as it's the plan of prudence, you ignore the language. Laugh aloud, guffaw, sit by his side, and begin pipes and coffee, maybe smoke with them and have coffee with them. He then proceeds to utilize you. Now, he tells the reader to anticipate that when you do this person will try to use you, will try to get something out of you. To beg in one country for your interest and in another for your tobacco. So in some countries, they will try to use you by begging for your interest, begging for your, I guess, like attention, something like that. But in another, they will try to use you by getting material things out of you. That's why he uses, I think, tobacco stands in for material things. You gently but decidedly thrust that subject out of the way. So he basically says when they start like trying to use you, suggesting like they want something out of you, you basically ignore that subject and move on to something else and choose what is most interesting to yourself. And then you ignore whatever the suggestions they are making or the requests they are trying to make. And then you turn the subject into what you want to talk about or something that is interesting to you. As might be expected, he will at times refer to his own concerns. So he tells the reader, when you do that, when you change the subject from their request or them trying to use you, utilize you, as he says, they will try, and you bring the topic to something that is interesting to you, they will still want to go back to their conversation or to whatever they wanted to tell you or whatever they wanted to ask you. And he says that is expected. Your superior obstinacy will oppose effectual passive resistance to all such efforts. So you are more knowledgeable than this person. You understand human psychology more than this person. You should use it to beat back that attempts or those attempts to bring the conversation to what they want, and you maintain the conversation to be on what you want or what you find interesting. That's very powerful, actually. That's very powerful. That's very powerful, actually, because he's basically trying to train the reader on how to take control of the interaction that they might have with an East African, a Somali, or somebody, one of the Orientals, as he calls them. By degrees, the episodes diminish in frequency and duration. At last, they cease altogether. The man is now your own. So they will try to, it's like you are wrestling. So it's training on the tactics of judo, verbal judo, or wrestling with arguments. So it says initially they will want to drive the conversation to where they want, and most likely that conversation is going to where they are trying to utilize you, to use you. But make sure you avoid that. You try to maintain the control of the conversation, and they will continue trying to drive the conversation the way they want. But after a few attempts and using your own knowledge, because you are more knowledgeable, you are superior, uses the word superior, what will happen? They will give up. And now the man is yours. You can now use them the way you want. Now, he will move to explain to us how he packages himself, the image he portrays, how he achieves that, and why that image is so important. So, in life, image is everything, especially when it comes to how we interact with people. And many people know this, that there is a persona, it's called a persona. The person you see when you talk to someone is not the person they are to themselves, or they are not even the same person other people see. People put on, we can call it a mask, depending on who they are dealing with. And that's very important, because people put on the mask because they have certain goals they want to achieve. So if it's a person who wants to seduce you or to flirt with you so that you can do something, there is a mask they will put on. There is a costume they will put on. There is a persona they will put on so that they are able to achieve that. So he talks about his persona, the persona he wore, so that he's able to manipulate the Somali and other Orientals, as he says. So he's going to talk about that. And this is what he says. You will bear in mind, if you please, that I am a Muslim merchant. So he's reminding the reader that, remember, while in Somalia, I was a Muslim merchant. That's the persona he has. That's the persona he's wearing. That's the mask he has on. So the people who are interacting with him in Zayla and wherever he went when he was in the land of the Somali, they saw him as a Muslim merchant. But he wasn't. This is a mask he wore. And he says, a character not to be confounded with the notable individual seen on Change. So this is a character he's created, and he calls it a character. And this character should not be confounded, which I guess is maybe confused with a character or individual seen on Change. Now, Change here seems to me to be an internal lingo that we might struggle so much today to understand. Seems like it came from either the pop culture of the time, or maybe this is something that the person is addressing knew about, and I don't think we are likely to understand what it means, but we can get the general meaning to be that the merchant, the Muslim merchant, the persona he has on the Muslim merchant is a different character from this. He continues, a Makata in the East is a compound of tradesman. So he's explaining now how he needs to carry himself. Define TG, which is another linko, but don't worry about that, because we are going to get the general picture. Usually of gentle birth. So he's saying, and this is very interesting, seems like he was so careful in building this persona. He did not leave anything to chance. He took care of everything. He did it like a fiction writer does, or a movie producer does. That is, building a character, taking care of everything about them, from how they dress, how they talk, how they their facial expressions, where they came from, their origins, and how that informs their psychology. It seems like he thought about all that, because he says, now this character is one of the Muslim merchant, was born in gentle birth, which I guess means he did not come from very rich background. And he says he is everywhere welcomed and respected. And he bears in his mind and manner that if Allah please, he may become prime minister a month after he has sold you a yard of cloth. So he creates this impression to the people he does trade with, the commerce with, that he is looking, or is about to become something big. So you feel like, I'm doing business with somebody who is very soon going to be even bigger than what they are today. He continues, commerce appears to be an accident, not an essential with him. So this character needs to look like, for them, they are doing business, it was an accident and not essential. It's not something that they have to do. Yet he is by no means deficient in acumen. So, but that doesn't mean that they are not good at what they do as a businessman, as a merchant. They have to be good. And then he says, he is a grave and reverent signia. I try to look for the meaning of signia. Looks like a respectable person, something like that. With rosary in hand, remember, I know rosary is a word for, I think, is the Catholics who have the bead, what is it called? The bead string that they use for prayers, and I think Muslims have that too. So he uses the word rosary, but I guess he means that. Somebody can tell me in the comment section what is it called? The beads that Muslims use for prayers, and Catholics also use them for prayers, and I guess several other religions have them. And he says he has that in hand and Quran on lip, meaning he has to be very good with the understanding of the Quran, so that when he talks to people, he is able to persuade them that he understands it very well. He is generally a pilgrim, talks at dreary length about holy places. He has to be very knowledgeable about the holy places. So when he meets people and he talks to them, he has to have these long conversations about the holy places, which goes into trying to make them comfortable with him and buying him as this honorable person. He says, writes pretty hand, has read and can recite much poetry, in his master of his religion, demeans himself with respectability, is perfect in all his points of ceremony and politeness, and feels equally at home whether sultan or slave sit upon his counter. So he has to know how to carry himself depending on who is sitting across them. Whether it's a slave, he should know how to carry himself. Whether it's a sultan, he should know how to carry himself. He continues to say, he has a wife and children in his own country. So he has to portray this image of he has a wife and children from wherever he comes from. I guess there is a reason for that. And today we can argue that, this was an old society where having a family was very important to people, and people would respect you by actually mentioning that you have a family. And in fact, there is a part of this book where it says in the Somaliland, you're actually counted to be, you joined the rank of actually respectable men when you married your fourth wife. Before you married your fourth wife, you are not considered to be a respectable, man. So this is a society where having a family is very important, and you have to portray that. You have to show them that, hey, I also have a family from wherever I come. And he, of course, tells them that this is what he says, where he intends to spend the remnant of his days, but the world is uncertain. Because, of course, you go travel, anything is possible. You might drop somewhere, and that will be the end of you. That's what basically he's saying. I don't get the point of him bringing that up, but there must be a reason why he's bringing that up. And he says the world is uncertain. Fate descends, and a man's eye seeth it not. The earth is a charnel house. There is a lot of violence in the earth and a lot of chaos, of course, which is true. Bravely, his many wise old so give him a kind of theoretical consciousness that his bones may molder in other places than his. So he does actually give us all this. And I find this to be very interesting. And this is exactly the main reason why we should read these documents, because we will understand the manipulation and how people are able to take control of people and do whatever they wanted to do. Those are my random thoughts.